Good morning, everyone. It is Friday, the favorite day of the week for most people. It's always the scariest day of the week for me because I realize I often have a whole lot to do and not a whole lot of time to do it. But that's okay. Sometimes you work your way into a corner and you have to find your way out of it. I actually made a little poker advice with my baby James this morning on working yourself into a tough spot and having to find your way out of it. And sometimes you mess up. To be fair, I didn't mess up or anything. I just have a lot to do. I want to thank you for joining me for a little coffee. You can now listen to this on iTunes, by the way, on all the podcast applications. So if you cannot join me live each day, and you also don't want to watch the video, then you can listen on iTunes. Make sure you like, subscribe, whatever you do. And I'm happy to have you here today. Today, we have a question that you all sent in. Guess you can't really see this. It says, how do we play in Straddle games? So this assumes we're playing a cash game. However, a lot of people are going to think, oh, I don't play cash games, so I'm turning it off right now. It's still very important to realize how various strategic adjustments you must make when things are happening in the game that you may not be used to. And this can be, say, someone just raises every hand it folds to them, right? Well, it's kind of like they straddled. And you will find that happens very often in tournaments. So let's get to it. So the typical straddle, the standard straddle, is when there's a small blind for half a big blind, let's say we're playing 5-10 for simplicity. Small blind's 5, big blind's 10, straddle, under the gun, first position is now 20. That person goes last pre-flop, just as if they had min-raised blind under the gun, and then play progresses as normal. This is a very, very detrimental thing to do. If you want to lose at poker, the easiest way to lose at poker is to straddle under the gun. A lot of people do this to try to induce action or make people go crazy or make the game play bigger. But you have to understand, if you view yourself as a skilled player, what do you want? Well, very often you want to play deep stacked poker. Straddling cuts the stacks in half. And you want to play pots from in position. And straddling makes you play pots out of position. So, straddling under the gun is an awful, awful, awful idea. You'll see some places that allow the straddler to make it even more. So it'll be like $5, $10, and then $50 straddle or $100 straddle. One time I played a 1-3 game at Stone's Gambling Hall, aptly named. And it was 1-3 with a 75 straddle sometimes. So, just a nice casual, I don't know how many big blinds that is. 25 big blinds. 25 big blinds straddle under the gun. And you have to understand that really just makes you play a very shallow stacked game when that happens. The Nelson says people tend to play tighter while straddling and doesn't even make the game better. Now, I generally disagree with this. Typically, the straddler plays very, very loose and aggressive, which may induce other people to be tight because, in theory, if the stacks just got cut in half and you were playing, let's say, 100 big blinds, now you're playing 50, you should be playing a generally stronger range, right? You have less post-flop implied odds. That said, very often the player who does straddle is going to be on the maniacal side. And if you're against the maniac who is going to be out of position against you, well, in theory, you should be playing a wider range of decent high card hands. I see everyone here on YouTube today. Welcome. If you're here on Twitch or Facebook or Periscope or Twitter, let me know. So anyway, what ends up happening is a very common action will be, say we're playing 5, 10, 20, and it goes limp for 20, limp for 20, limp for 20. It'll get around to the straddler. Straddler will raise big to like 400, thinking all these limpers probably have nothing. I can just pick up this free money. I have to make up for the fact that I put money in poorly from out of position, and that's what they do. And I think that's a pretty bad mistake. But if you know that your opponent's going to do that, what should you do? Well, you should do a lot of limping with good hands to trap them. So, if you know that you can easily trap your opponent, well, then you're good to go, right? Just limp with your good hands. Also, you can limp with marginal stuff because the player doesn't limp, or you don't get raised every single time when you limp, so you can limp a few other hands. It's fine to be relatively balanced in this spot. Like, say you get 9-8 suited, you should probably still just limp it, right? That said, if you raise to, let's say, $60, the straddler will call a lot, then you should be raising with the 9-8 suited and limping with the aces. Looks like we don't have... Oh, there's a chat from Twitch. Hello, Twitch. If anyone's here from Twitter or Periscope, let me know. I'm always paranoid that these programs aren't working. The other day, my YouTube chat just stopped working on me. So that was lame. But we're trying to figure out the technology. Technology's hard. So, if you know the Straddler is going to be a lunatic, trap them. And usually Straddlers will be lunatics. Most of the time, Straddlers are not going to be tight, passive players, unless the whole table agrees to straddle, in which case you're just playing a 3 big blind game. If you're playing a 3 big blind game, by the way, when someone straddles, small blind should be very, very, very tight. Because the small blind's now in an even worse situation. D. Nelson says, why not raise with your best hands? Is it because you want to give him the incentive to raise you? Yes. People typically think whenever you raise the Straddler, in their mind, they're crazy, right? Crazy person's going to think, okay, this guy who's playing reasonably has raised into me, into my Straddle. Well, you, the guy raising, must have a pretty good hand. So if you must have a pretty good hand, then I shouldn't be playing too aggressively, right? I should just call and try to get a good flop. So, but if you limp, quite often they'll think, okay, this guy would have raised if he had a good hand, therefore he limped, or since he limped, he must have some garbage hand. And if they think that, that is their baseline thinking. Clearly you want to play exactly the opposite of what you want. One time straddling does make sense is, say the stacks are incredibly deep, which often will happen at uncapped cash games. You'll be playing like 10, 20, no limit, and people will have $20,000 in front of them. Clearly you're not getting in 1,000 big blinds ever. So, if you straddle, you effectively now play a game where you can conceivably get in 500 big blinds. So you actually get the whole stacks at risk. That may make sense if the whole table straddles. Really, though, you don't want to be the only straddler. That's very, very, very bad. Let's see. GTO Davey said, you did that yesterday. Lent the small blind. Straddler went crazy. Went from $20 to $300. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Easy to trap people like that. Are you supposed to squeeze more often in straddle games? Well, there's a little bit more dead money in the pot. Well, there's more money in the pot. It's not necessarily dead. You're saying if there are a lot of limpers, say it goes limp, 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 and you're on the button, you should probably just play normally. I would not change it up too incredibly much from there. So, Kevin Smith says, you played in places that let you straddle on the button. One guy did it all night until you busted him. So, let's talk about button straddling. I actually think button straddling is not such a bad play. Whenever you get above something like 150 big blinds, button straddling becomes very, very powerful. So let's talk about button straddling. What is a button straddle? This is referred to as a Mississippi straddle. There are a few other variants of this. The most common variant, though, is pre-flop, small blind goes first. So think about this. If you're in the small blind, just to set it up, small blind's 5, big blind's 10, and then the player on the button puts in 20 or 25 or 40 or whatever they want to do. Typically, you want to do the minimum. You can do more as stacks get deeper. Player on the button puts in 20. Now, a person to the left of the last bet goes first in most games, and so that would be the small blind. Small blind now he has 2 options. Well, 3 options. He can fold and give up his $5 small blind. He can limp for 20, or he can raise. Well, raising from the small blind into everyone at the table is really, really rough because you have to worry about everyone else at the table, right? So that is quite bad. Next, what about limping? Well, if you limp, you also have to worry about everyone else at the table, which is also quite bad. So small blind should actually fold a ton. A ton. It's brutal. If the player on your button is straddling and no one else at the table is straddling, you need to move seats. When you're in the small blind. If you're in small blind and the button straddling, you need to move seats. It is that bad for you. Because you just don't get to realize your equity at all. Your small blind is just completely thrown in the garbage. If you're in the big blind, it's not quite as bad, but it's still pretty bad. Because if you raise, you're raising into everyone at the table. And remember, the player on the button gets to call, knowing he's closing the action, which is also quite brutal. And if you limp, again, everybody else can raise. So you should be folding a lot from your big blind. If you're in the big blind and the button is straddling, you should also be folding a lot. So the blinds get screwed. If the blinds get screwed, now what happens? Blinds fold. Now it's on the under the gun player. Under the gun now has to raise into all the players yet to act, and the player on the button gets to close the action. It's also quite bad. So in this game, in theory, everyone should play really, really tightly. It says we're having a connection issue on YouTube, or on Instagram. That's not good. Instagram, are we having a bad connection issue today? If we are, please let me know. Anyway. You have to be very, very tight when the button is straddling. because the player on the button is closing the action in position, and you just can't really beat that. It's very, very rough. So, it says we do have bad connection. Give me just 1 second. Let's make sure. Sure enough, I'm on the wrong Wi-Fi again. How does this always happen? Give me just 1 second, everyone. I'm connecting to the proper Wi-Fi. I got this Wi-Fi extender, and sometimes it disconnects me. All right, we're reconnecting. All right, we should be back. I'm on the correct Wi-Fi now. Okay. Everyone should be very, very tight whenever there is a button straddle. However, they're not. So what often happens when there's a button straddle? Well, someone raises. Let's say we're playing 5-10 with $20 button straddle. Someone will raise to $60. Straddler gets the call in position very frequently. And that's brutal, right? You don't want to be playing out of position when you're risking a lot of money. So if that's just what's going to happen in your games, the button can straddle pretty freely and then just do a lot of calling in position. What can you do to punish the button straddler? Well, the only thing you can realistically do is you can trap a lot. You can limp, have them bluff raise, then you can re-raise, forcing them out of the pot. So say you limp, a few other people limp for 20, Straddler makes it 120, like a standard-ish raise. You then make it something like 400 out of your $1,000 stack. Straddler can't do a whole lot. Maybe you make it 330 or 360, something like that. Alternatively, you could just raise big pre-flop. You could just make it $120, right? 6 big blinds from out of position. That's something else you can do. But what you don't want to be doing is you don't want to be raising small. A lot of people get in their minds, okay, I'm supposed to make a 3 big blind raise pre-flop. They make a 3 big blind raise to 60, and that just plays right into the button's strengths. Or they limp with all sorts of garbage and only raise their good hands, and now the button gets to just see the effectively free flop when he wants and raise for value when he wants. And that's very, very bad for you. So, button straddling is actually quite a powerful play. On my YouTube channel, I was showing a program that lets you watch a video and answer questions that is live in a live poker tournament. Paul, I'm not sure what you're referring to at all. But I have all sorts of stuff on YouTube. What are these apples stacked on the shelf? Well, in case I get hungry. You never know when you're going to get hungry. So, let's see. You'll have a bunch of questions. Opera says that he is enjoying excelling at No Limit Hold'em and mastering small stakes in No Limit Hold'em. Great. How much skill is involved in winning at poker? Well, in the long term, it's all skill. In the short term, it's almost... I'm not going to say almost no skill. It's relatively little skill. It's also important to ask what you mean by skill, right? In my mind, skill essentially means can you lose on purpose? If you're playing roulette, for example, you cannot lose at roulette on purpose. It's impossible. If you play, everyone has the same edge. That is a purely luck-based game. In poker, it's really easy to lose if you try, right? Just put in all of your money besides $1 and then fold. You lose. You can give away the game. Therefore, there must be some skill involved, because if you play atrociously bad, then you just lose, right? So clearly, there is skill involved. Now, the question is there a big skill difference once you have studied the game a little? And the answer is still yes. If you read one book and then you try to play against the best players in the world, you're going to get demolished. Not even close. You will lose a lot, very frequently. But if I am the number 5 player in the world and you're the number 1 player in the world, no one's going to have much of an edge there. So I guess essentially the question is, if that is the question, is there a big skill difference between the best players in the world and the players like slightly below them? Not really a lot. But is there a big skill difference between the best players in the world and the very novice players? Yes, there's a gigantic difference. That said, over time, the best players win all the time. I discussed this in a little coffee from a few days ago where I discussed how I turned $50 into $300,000. And I did the vast majority of that without ever buying in for more than $200. So I had a $200 buy-ins and I turned it into $300,000 playing on party poker just by playing a lot of games with a tiny edge. I didn't even have a big edge, I had a small edge. And that was it. What do I think about a bunch of people's content on YouTube? I don't watch a whole lot of content, I make the content. So I honestly cannot give you good advice on that. I know Andrew Nemi seems like a nice guy. Split Suit seems like a nice guy. And I know Hunter wrote a book that's very good on D&B poker. So presumably all their content is good. What's their pre-flop range when there's 5+ people consistently seeing the flop? Depends on how they're seeing the flop, right? Are they seeing the flop when it goes raise, re-raise, 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 or is it raise, call, 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 right? Those are two very different spots. So make sure you phrase your question in a way that allows me to actually answer it. So are the players who play all the super high rollers pretty close in skill? Yes. Thus they are just shifting around money. They're shifting around money besides the few amateurs. In a $25,000 tournament, let's say Aria, that has 30 people in it, there may be 3 or 4 recreational players, and then there may be 27 pros. Well, essentially what they're doing is they are chopping up the 25,000 of the 3 recreational players. So let's say they lose 50%. That means there's 37,500 in dead money in the pot, getting split up among 27 pros. 37.5 divided by 27 is $1,000 or so. So they're all making some small ROI. Whenever I try to play the high roller tournaments, I'm usually playing the big soft ones. There's going to be a great one in Baha Mar put on by Party Poker in November. This is at 25,000 with 400 people guaranteed. Well, in that spot, there may be 200 fairly weak players, right? Or people who are just playing significantly larger than they're used to. And in that spot, now, if they're all minus 50%, now you have 100 dead buy-ins in the pot. So 2.5 million getting divided between 300 players. I don't even know what 2.5 million divided by 300 is, but it's probably, 9,000 each or something like that. So there, you're getting 40% ROI. It really is just a math game, though. It's not as easy. I mean, it really is just as easy as how much dead money's in the pot, how much do I expect to collect. Now, some good pros will have a higher return on investment than others. Some may have 100% ROI, others may have 10% ROI. And that's really where it is kind of difficult to figure out exactly where you stand, because clearly the best players are going to have the highest ROI. In your neighborhood, there's a soft 1-2 game with a high rake. Is it even worth playing? With a shallow cap? Probably not. Depends on how bad the players are. 5% rake cap at 20. I mean, listen, it's hard to beat giant caps. Just because the game exists does not mean you have to play it. It's very, very important to understand. What do I think about when a supernit suddenly starts to straddle? To you, it means they're aware of their image and are trying to change it. I mean, yeah, but they're doing it in a bad way, honestly. Because if they wanted to change their image, they should start raising and re-raising in position, not straddling from out of position. You enjoyed my pokerography. Excellent. So Poker Go filmed a pokerography episode about me. It's a 22-minute long piece about my life, how I became me. You can find it at jonathanlittlepoker.com/pokerography, I think. POKEROGRAPHY. It's the first post on my blog, jonathanlittlepoker.com/blog. You can pull it right up. It's completely free to watch the whole thing now. So go there, check it out. Give the video lots of views, lots of likes, and hope they enjoy it. I hope you all enjoy it. Let's see, been watching my WPT wins. Would I be interested in having copies of those? I guess if it's easy enough, sure. Send me an email at support@pokercoaching.com. Michael said, just finished mastering small stakes no limit hold'em. Great. How much rake is reasonable? Listen, I think something like $6 at 1-2 is beatable, but still high. The problem is that a lot of casinos are raising the rake over and over and over again to the point where now it's rough to beat. Or they take a lot of rake pre-flop. Like I know in a place in Florida, it's like $7 no matter what. That's insane. $7 at 5-10, so not 1-2. $7 at 5-10 and 10-20. So if you raise and steal the blinds, you have to pay $7. Clearly, 7 out of the 15 you steal is absurd. Other than the opening ranges, what are some good ways to spot the strongest players at the table? General command of the table, the way they handle themselves, the way they put their chips in the pot, the way they play. Are they aggressive? Are they passive? Etc., etc. People are saying 5% rake in California, $6 to $7. And Chinese applications take 2%. 2% uncapped is also pretty rough. Arts in Vegas for business. Have fun with that. What about games that have a rock? So a rock is a straddle that is mandatory. Quite often. So basically, if you win the pot, you have to put $10 in blind. And sometimes the action goes around you. Sometimes you're last. figure out how it changes the actions, what it amounts to. Quite often, if it's just how the game plays, it's not that big of a deal and should not be accounted for too much if people aren't adjusting too much for it. But in general, to be fair, I haven't played very many games with a rock. In general, though, I'm trying to even think what it depends on if the rock goes last or if the rock goes in turn. If the rock goes last, or the action just goes around them and then they go last, that's pretty good for the rock. But if they're out of position, they can't do a whole lot if people are raising. Really, the question is, are they going to be in position or out of position? If they're going to be in position, then you can't do a whole lot about that. But if they're going to be out of position, you can start raising a lot from in position and put them in a really bad spot. Let's see. You're noob and confused. I have many products. Where should you start? Start at pokercoaching.com. There you can get a completely free trial and go back to the very first quiz and homework webinar. Go back to the very beginning. And then go through all of that. It'll take you a lot of time, probably more than a week if you do it right. But if you do all that, you'll be very, very well prepared. And you'll be thinking about poker in the right manner. A lot of people just think, oh, what are my cards? What should I do? But no, you need to think about your range. And that's something that a lot of people very rarely think about. They just think about what cards are in their hand when they first start playing. So yeah, how do you play when it does go raise, call, call, call in a bunch of games? Well, just play hands that flop well. If you know you're gonna, if you 3-bet, if you know you're gonna get called by a bunch of people, just start 3-betting entirely a strong linear range. You don't need to bluff, right? If people are calling stations, then don't bluff. If people fold too much, bluff a lot. It really is as simple as that. You have to know what a lot means, which is what we teach at poker coaching. A lot of people get it in their minds that I can just exploit these players and crush them. But if you don't really know how to go about crushing them, and you don't know what a lot is, you may be raising way too few hands thinking that it's a lot. One of my most recent homework questions at poker coaching was actually, we have two different variations that are happening. One is, everyone folds you on the button. The two players you have to act are tight and passive. What is your strategy? And my strategy on the button was raise like 90% of hands. I think I was by far the loosest of all of these students who submitted their answer, which is good because it's something they can improve on. Next month's question is, how would you play if the two players in the blinds are maniacs? Obviously, I give stack sizes and discuss what kind of tournament it is, etc. But I'm betting I'm going to be tighter than most people next time, because if you know you're going to get 3-bet, just play good cards. If you know you're going to get called and then check raise a lot, just play good cards. How did I decide poker coaching was a good idea and start acting on it? Oh, I try all sorts of stuff. I'm not afraid to start things. One thing I have learned is that if all it takes is my time, I am in. I do a lot, like this podcast is a great example. This show. I decided, I think I can handle a morning show. I can talk for 30 minutes each morning. And I just decided to start doing it. With poker coaching, that was a bit more of a setup to get started because I had to get pokercoaching.com, which is actually the domain that my first poker coach, Bill Seymour, had. And he eventually gave the domain to me. I mean, I had to buy it from him, but I got the domain. I thought it was a good domain, pokercoaching.com. And then I started making quizzes, and I had one of my business partners make the website. And I knew it would be a decent amount of work each month because I do now 4 quizzes. No, I'm sorry. I do 8 quizzes a month. Then I have Matt Affleck and Alex Fitzgerald both do quizzes as well. And I knew I'd have to do the homework webinars, which do take 4 hours to make and 4 hours to do. They take a long time. So, worst case, it costs me, 30 hours a month? If it fails, then it fails. Actually, you know what? I was going to say I would do a lot of things that fail. Most of the things I try don't fail. Instead, I just don't stick with them because they don't provide benefit. But you do need to stick with things for quite a while. Like this show, for example. We're getting maybe 1,000 views a day, which is a good number. I mean, I'm happy with 1,000 views. And I will definitely keep this up. But if you told me I was doing something that was getting like 20 views, then I would just stop doing it. One thing I stopped a long time ago was my Bankroll Builder Challenge. This was way before it became cool to do Bankroll Builder Challenges. And it wasn't that popular because it's kind of boring watching someone play 5 cent, 10 cent, no limit. And so I, turned my $300 into about 1,000, and I decided to stop. That's okay. It's important to know when to quit. If you don't have a whole lot going on in your life, you need to be very, very willing to start. once you have a lot going on in your life, you have to be very careful when it comes to starting things. So as you get more and more successful, you have to become better and better at saying no. But whenever you're first starting, you have nothing going on. It's completely free to do these things. It just takes your time. Don't be lazy is what it amounts to. So why did I make PokerCoaching.com? Well, I knew I needed to stay home with my son, Mr. James. You all have seen him in my little poker advice videos. And how do I stay home with my son and still make an income? Well, make a coaching site that is better than all the other ones. So that's what we did. On Poker Coaching, we offer hand-in-hand analysis, cash games and tournaments. I actually have a decent amount of cash games hands coming out in the future, so that's going to be good for everyone. But Matt Affleck has a decent amount of cash game hands as well. So cash games and tournaments. Just go check it out. It's free. I know it's so good that I'll let you join for free. A lot of the other training sites want you to pay $1,000 up front or $100 up front to access their material. I know it's good, and I know you're going to want to keep using it. So take it for free for a week. And if you can get through the whole site in a week, cancel on me. I don't care. I want to make sure that you get better at poker, and I want to help you improve your life. Let's see. Dante says, you got crushed trying to call down light. Felt players who are overvaluing hands and bluffing. Yeah, that's how you do it. Sometimes they will beat you, though. Every once in a while, they will make up with good hands. A lot of people in the chat are talking about table image. In your experience, small stakes players very rarely pay attention to that. Yeah, I generally agree. Most small stakes players don't care at all unless your image is absurd, right? Like if you sit there and literally play no hands for 5 hours, then they're going to think you're a nit. If you raise and 3-bet and 4-bet every single hand, they're going to think you're crazy. But if you're anywhere near reasonable, they're just going to think you're reasonable. You'll know that people are paying attention to your image when they start commenting on it. When they start saying, oh, you raise again, huh? After you've raised for the 5th time in a row. Well, then they're probably going to start, they're going to start adjusting. But even then, just because people are aware that you are playing a lot that doesn't necessarily mean that they will adjust. Does the fact that you are hot change the dynamic much? Depends on if the people are into you or not. Hot is a very relative term. People like different things. All right, you're a licensed nurse, you work graveyard shift, you try to play poker on the weekends. How do you think you can improve on playing more hours? You feel like you don't play enough. You have to find when your free time is. Maybe you start playing online. I started playing online. I was a kid working a full-time job, and I was going to college. I actually had 2 full-time jobs when I was going to college, which is a lot of hours. And I tried to sneak in playing when I could and studying when I could. One of my jobs gave me a lot of free time, so I studied and played a lot when I had that job. You just need to be very aware of where your time is going. And you need to find ways that you can consolidate things that you're doing in little spurts and do those in chunks. Like, for example, my weekly poker hand podcast that I put out each week, I actually record 5 or 6 of those at a time. So it's not like I'm sitting down to record a session every week. I just do one long session every 6 weeks, right? So I'm consolidating that, and that allows me to use my time more wisely. So batching things you can do in batches is very beneficial. Obviously, a lot of things you can't do in batches, like this live show. I can't do this in batches. Like taking care of your child, you can't do that in batches. But some things you can, and if you can, you should at least give that a try. For those who have not tried, poker coaching is awesome. Good. Well, I've been saying it. I'm glad you all are saying it too. You've been getting crushed in 50-50 spots. So frustrating. Quite often that means you're not playing with a big enough bankroll, or it means you are not playing enough. If you play a million hands, you cannot get crushed in your 50-50 spots. It doesn't happen. I mean, you can't get crushed and you're down like 50, but 50 out of 5,000 is not that big of a deal. You may be down 1%, right? So you're just not playing enough, or you're playing on too short of a bankroll, almost certainly. All right. You want to start a YouTube channel in Chinese, but you're afraid everyone will know how to play. Do you have any suggestions? You can teach people a lot, and they're not necessarily going to apply it. And those who do apply it will be very appreciative of your work, and they will love you. So, figure out if that's worth it for you. But people like content, and if there is no good Chinese poker content out there, and you feel like making it, feel free to make it. I mean, you all know I have my book in Chinese now. Here it is. strategies for beating small stakes poker tournaments in Chinese. So I'm already doing it. And I don't even know Chinese. So I already started the ball rolling, so you might as well go ahead and hop in there. All right. Any chance you can get a copy of your book signed at the World Series? If I'm there, if you ever find me anywhere, feel free to say hi and get your book signed. I am more than happy to do that. Person with the Chinese name says, you were there at the book launch. Well, good. I'm very, very happy that you were there. It was a cool thing. I'm going to post the pictures as soon as they let me. Basically, it was me on a Skype chat with a bunch of people in the room. It was crazy. You never see anything like that in America. So that was nice. There's no such language as Chinese. Yes, I actually don't know which Chinese dialect this is in. If the Chinese name that obviously I cannot pronounce because I don't know Chinese knows what dialect it is in, please let me know. Oh yeah, so I'm actually going to Montreal in 2 weeks, and on November 1st I'm having a breakfast for whoever wants to attend. Actually, not for whoever wants to attend. We're capping it at 21 people. We're already up to about 15, so I have 5 or 6 more spots available. And if you all want to attend, send me an email, support@pokercoaching.com. Only send me an email if you're going to be there, please, because space is limited. They only gave me a room that holds 21 people. But if you're going to be in Montreal on November 1st, 9:30 a.m., send me an email. I'm happy to buy you breakfast. I think I'm going to start doing that more and more often. Whenever I travel, I do it during the World Series. This summer we had like 40 people at the breakfast. It was probably a little bit too much. XD, the Chinese symbols, says it is Cantonese. Well, good. Cantonese. Thank you very much. Now I know. Thank you, XD. I'm the worst with names, by the way. If I see your name like 4 days in a row in the chat and it's in English, I may remember it. If it's in Chinese, I'm going to have a tough time. To be fair, there's only one Chinese name here, so I guess I should be able to remember XD. With antes, what is your standard opening size for 30 or greater than 30 big blinds? It depends. And also you should have different sizes as stacks get bigger, right? 60 big blinds and 30 big blinds is very different. I typically use slightly bigger raise sizes than most because the pot's bigger. And as players figure this out, especially good players have already figured this out, the big blind should be defending and 3-betting. People should be playing a lot more hands, right? So if they should be playing a lot more hands, you want to disincentivize that. You do that by raising bigger. Would you ever play in Reno? I have played in Reno. I don't think people realize I've been around for, I've been traveling and playing live poker since 2006. What's that, 12 years now. I've been to a lot of places. If they've ever had a World Poker Tour there, I've probably been there. And they did have a World Poker Tour in Reno. Pat says, what's the difference between Float the Turn and Poker Coaching? Float the Turn is a traditional training site with a lot of videos. I actually went through there recently and curated learning paths. So say you want to study exactly small stakes tournaments, I have a list of good small stakes tournament videos for you. We're actually going to be rolling that into Poker Coaching in the very near future. So it's going to be part of it. So keep an eye out for that if it's in your email. Can you read books in any order? I definitely suggest you start with part 1 of all the part 1 books. And I would just tell you to get Mastering Small Stakes No Limit Hold'em first, most likely. What is Mr. James going to be for Halloween? He is going to be a knockoff version of, for Monsters, Inc., the big blue one. I think his name is, what's his name, Telly or something like that? I'm sure someone here knows the big blue monster's name. That's what he's going to be for Halloween this year. JJ Pregler here. Hello, JJ. Welcome. JJ Pregler is a super commenter, moderator on my forum. Thank you for all the help. Have I ever played in the UK? If so, how did I do? I've only played in the UK one time. I guess we'll tell the full story. I was in the World Series of Poker Europe in, where was it? Cannes, France. And I went to bed. The next day was a 3,000 euro shootout. Tom Dwan calls me out of the blue and says, hey, someone in this casino in London owes me £100,000. They're having a £100,000 tournament tomorrow. Go play that for me. So his name's Sully, not Telly. So anyway, I get up. I go with another poker player. Apparently the guy maybe owed 200,000 pounds. And we both play. This was at Aspinall's Club, which is a sweet penthouse type place, like a townhouse in London. It was amazing. It was a private tournament, I suppose, because there were only super high stakes poker players there. Phil Ivey was on my right the whole time. That was fun. All the Germans were there, etc., etc. And then a bunch of Chinese guys. And they added 100,000 pounds to the prize pool. I think there was something like 20 players. And so it was 100,000 pounds. I end up on the bubble. It was me and JC Tran and a Chinese guy. And I had aces. I think I must have raised like 3 big blinds. JC called off a tiny stack, and then the big stack called. I was a medium stack on the bubble. Flop comes like queen, 5, 2. I have aces. No, it must have been like 10, 5, 2. So checks to me. I bet. JC Tran, I think, goes all in for his tiny stack. I think there were 7 people remaining. 5 got paid. Then there were no other tiny stacks. So then the Chinese guy goes all in for slightly more than I had. And I was like, oh, this is brutal. Anyway, I didn't fold. And he had pocket 5s. So I bubbled the 100,000 pound tournament. That was a lot of fun. You still write notes when you play live. I use mostly the Share My Pair app at this point. I figured out how to use it quickly. It's has a steep learning curve. But that's what I use. So anyway, after I busted, I was very sad and depressed. I went and took a train back to France and continued playing the rest of that series. So that was my only time playing in London. Let's see. How do you adjust your raise size based on position? I don't think it's that big of a deal as long as you structure your range intelligently. You should definitely be making it bigger from out of position. That's certainly a good idea. I suppose from the small blind and big blind are by far the most important times to be raising bigger. Would you favor, if you are the raise first in, not varying your raise size? I typically don't, because the people who I play against are very good. And if you're playing against very bad players who are not going to be aware of what you are doing and the fact that you are a good player as well, you really shouldn't vary it too much, and you should probably just develop a fundamentally sound strategy that is better than theirs. Because you don't really know what you're inducing if they're good, right? This is why game theory optimal strategies are so strong, is because you don't have to know what your opponents are doing wrong. And if your opponents are good, very often you're not going to know what they're doing wrong, but they will be doing things wrong. So, say for example, you call a little bit too much pre-flop, but I don't know it. Say you're supposed to call, let's just pretend 10% of the time, but you call 12% of the time. Well, I don't know this, but if I just play closer to game theory optimal than you, in that spot, I'm naturally exploiting you without even knowing I'm exploiting you. It's almost as if you're exploiting yourself, right? So that's why I typically don't mix things up, because I don't know what I'm going to be inducing. Whenever you are trying to exploit someone, very often you have to be exploiting them correctly 3 times for every 1 time you're exploiting them incorrectly, because of the way the math works out. Counter exploits are way more powerful than just the first exploit. Like say, for example, I think you're too tight, so I'm going to start raising a lot. If you realize this and start calling a lot, now the fact that I'm raising a lot is just going to demolish me. So what was this question? Do I vary my raise size? I tend not to. You're working 9 to 5. Is it okay to play 1-2 without a standard bankroll? Sure, especially if you're not afraid of going broke. Could I have folded the 2 aces there? Probably not. I don't fold the 2 aces. That guy could have easily had king, queen, ace, queen. We're only playing like 30 or 40 big blinds deep. We were not deep stacked. How can you tell if people are exploiting you? That's a tough one. It's tough to know what you don't know. There are a lot of blind spots in poker and in life. And it's very, very difficult to know where your blind spots are. And this is why it's important to have people look at your game. Or to model your game after people who you know are good. So get a coach or sign up to a training site and follow someone who you think is very good. And that's a very good starting point. Any advice on starting stakes, bankroll, etc.? I have a book for you. Actually, it's not a book. It's only 14 pages. It's called the Bankroll Bible. You can get it at jonathanlittlepoker.com/bankroll. It's completely free. Go there, and it will tell you all of that. I definitely suggest you start small, though. You do not have to start for significant money. Don't think you have to just put all of your money in to poker. Start tiny and get experience. I started with $50 playing tiny stakes, tiny stakes. And realize the goal is not to get rich quick. The goal is to get good at poker. And those are two very different things. What do you use for a 3-bet sizing? It depends on stack sizes, Jelly Bean. It's not as easy as what do I do in all spots. I have a book called Mastering Small Stakes No Limit Hold'em. You can get it at jonathanlittlepoker.com/mastering. And it explains all of this in depth. You plan to play the $500 tournament in Sydney next month. What would you say is the most common mistakes people make? Usually they're too tight or way too loose and passive. Usually. But you got to pay attention. This is why it's important to just figure out what people are doing wrong. Don't go into the tournament thinking most people are too tight, therefore I'm going to bluff a lot. Or don't go in saying people bluff too much, therefore I'm going to be a net. You want to think, what are my specific opponents doing wrong and what can I do to exploit them? Someone told me to come to Australia. I've been to Australia twice. It's a great place. Problem is it's on the other side of the world and takes a lot of time. And time is what I do not have at the moment because I have a baby and a baby on the way. I decided a long time ago I wanted to be able to stay home with my babies for at least a while. Probably till they can get up and come with me. And that implies not going on trips that are too long. Actually, in November, I'm going to be gone longer than I would like, but there's a lot of good tournaments. Party Poker is hosting a tournament in Montreal. Again, email me if you want breakfast. That's going to be great. It's 5,000 Canadian dollars, 5 million guaranteed prize pool for that. They have a WPT 500, another 1,500, and a 10K, all in like a week time. It's very compact, so I like that a lot. And then also they have a tournament in the Bahamas that's going to be humongous. 2 10 million guaranteed tournaments in a week and a half, so some things you just aren't going to skip. D. Nelson, going to push the pizza pies. I love pizza pies. They're delicious. Where am I living now? New York City. Do you still play at Foxwoods? I never really played at Foxwoods besides the World Poker Tour tournaments. After they only had 70 people for their last 10K, they moved it down to like a $1,500 buy-in. And I haven't been back since. We discussed how to pick which tournaments to play, to travel to. We discussed that a day or two ago. 2 days ago, I think. So go back and listen to that one. Are you playing the 1,500 in Montreal? I absolutely am. There should be 10,000 people watching this stream. Well, should and actually are very different things. We're new here with this stream. I'm trying to find something that I can do every day to give people value. And, if you feel like I should be getting more views, please share this stream and my work with your friends. That's by far the most beneficial thing you can do for me, and it will help me out significantly. So click share, click like, click follow, whatever your options are. Raj says, please do this every day. I can't do it every day, because on weekends I have to wake up and be with my baby. Also, I don't think I'm going to be here this next Monday because I'm having a designer, Christina Solway, a 11211 Designs, redo my office. And tomorrow she's going to be on Monday she's going to be looking at the office. She actually designs high-end tree houses on HGTV. And I got thinking, this little office here is kind of like a tree house. So if she can make a tree house suite, she can probably make this tiny office suite. So we're going to be doing that on Monday at 9 a.m. most likely, unless she has to cancel for whatever reason. So I may not be here on Monday, but I will be here Tuesday through Friday. 9 a.m. Eastern Time every weekday, unless something comes up, unless I tell you about it. So I try to tell you about it. Do I like any poker movies? Well, Rounders is great. All right, it's time to go. We've been going 45 minutes. What are we going to talk about tomorrow? I have a lot of ideas to talk about. Let's talk about accountability and being results-oriented tomorrow. It's an important topic because most people aren't accountable. We'll get into that tomorrow, though. Thanks again. Have a great day. Press like, subscribe, share. Have a great weekend. Weekends are times when people can really lose their minds. And I've learned, at least for me, it makes the most sense to try to stay sane on the weekend so that you're productive on the next week. So, have fun. Be nice to someone. Enjoy yourself. And I'll talk to you.